All right, so thank you so much, Judy, for being here. We are very honored to have you as a guest in our class. And so, first of all, like all the things you do are amazing. You are based in Kenya, and yes, so I mean, and all you do with sustainability, sustainable tourism, tourism. We spoke so many times about sustainable tourism systems and application for Kenya and tourism and the role of tour operators and hospitality. So we always speak about so many interesting things, and I'm happy to share all of those with my students. So can you tell us, first of all, a little bit more of what you do? What's your job? What do you do? And the amazing things you do with your staff.
I will describe myself as a sustainable tourism advisor. So that's the first thing that we do. We are advisors in sustainable tourism. But more than anything else, I think we are also thinkers in sustainable tourism. We don't just advise, but we help businesses to think through. We spend a lot of time thinking around matters sustainable tourism. And so our territories of operations, and I don't mean physical territories, I just mean the areas in which we influence tourism, are with students. We work with universities, you know that. And so we aim to influence curriculum in different levels of learning, universities, mid-level colleges as well. We work with tour operators. We advise them on how to integrate sustainability into their tourism operations. We work with accommodation facilities of different types. This could be from very small tented camps to lodges to large hotels. We work with them to influence practice, everything towards sustainability. We support policy making, and so many times we are invited into government thinking processes, development of strategies for different government agencies that deal with tourism. And so we also influence policy. We work with destinations, not just destination marketing organizations, but also destinations themselves, to see how destinations can also respond to the call for sustainability. And yeah, we do this through different programs that we run at Sustainable Travel and Tourism Agenda, which is where we are domiciled. Excited to let you know that beginning January, we will be Sustainable Travel and Tourism Africa. We will be rebranding Tourism Africa, and that's very exciting because the space for sustainable tourism growth in Africa is still vast and growing. There are destinations that absolutely have not even scratched the surface when it comes to sustainability. In terms of advisory, we are also consultants for sustainability assessments. So we do destination assessments, we do product assessments, and we do service assessments for sustainability. We support sustainability work through project management. So we manage projects on behalf of organizations. And last but not least, we also do research related to sustainable tourism for our own consumption, but also to support in decision-making for all these territories where we operate, the ones that I have described. And from my description, you will realize that we believe that sustainability is for everyone, including the travelers, right? And how do we reach out to the travelers? I think we use our social media places so that people who have access to social media and have access to us will know that travelers have not been left behind in our agenda, that they also have a role to play, and a very significant role. So yes, sustainability is it's everybody's business. I know you and I can talk about many things, but I also want to mention about at this point that there are many, many myths that are associated with sustainability in tourism, or just sustainable tourism. The earlier day myths around sustainability, and this is the era when we were talking in the tourism sector, we were talking ecotourism. And the concept of ecotourism, there was a myth in those days that it could not be compatible with luxury. And so the luxury brands shunned ecotourism. If you look at the data and research on ecotourism, you do not find ecotourism next to a luxury brand or the global brands in hospitality and tourism. Because at that time, anything to do with the environment and to do with the communities was considered not mainstream in tourism. So when the proponents of ecotourism started talking about, we're going to go back to nature, we're going to start caring how we build our places where people stay and visit, how we manage these places, we must start respecting local cultures. And the big brands in particular felt very disconnected because they thought ecotourism was more for tourism that happens in natural areas. And so the urban in the cities and the city hotels, this had got nothing to do with them. So over time, these myths have been debunked. And today, when we're talking sustainable tourism, you find that some of the big brands are on top of it. Some of them are greenwashing. Some of them are genuinely interested in making a difference, and they're making a difference. I was actually pleasantly surprised that the Hospitality Alliance group was actually at COP28, and they took an agenda to COP28 to also look at a green financing for sustainable tourism, but they were also just talking about having conversations around what the hospitality industry is doing, towards a net zero, which all of us are talking about. But having said that, there are other myths that have been debunked over time. And Marta, you and I will recall that we all agree that there has been an evolution in the conceptualization and practice of sustainable tourism. Like I mentioned, ecotourism was in the early 90s. And then as you go towards the end of the 90s, then we got a mix of everything in between there. We started hearing propos tourism. That is also the time we started hearing about community-based tourism. Then quickly, in the footsteps of propos tourism and community-based tourism and nature tourism and all those kind of things, that was quickly overtaken by responsible tourism. Yeah. And then we, in the era of the Sustainable Development Goals, we now talk more about sustainable tourism and sustainability. Post-COVID, we have heard about regenerative tourism. A lot of talk about now it's not just sustaining, but it's also regenerating, so that we even make it better than we found it. It's not sustaining what we found. We need to regenerate and make it better. Now, combined with climate, now you hear more, Marta, I don't know whether this is, you've also noticed this, you hear more about nature positive tourism. This is what everyone is talking about at COP28 and other places, nature positive tourism. So it's good to understand what all these phases meant, what the emphasis was on every phase, what has remained constant, what has been shifting, right? And what influences emphasis in each of these different stages of conceptualization of what we will just call sustainable tourism. because I always say sustainable tourism is the mother of them all. All these other ones are its many little babies. There are those who are still stuck with ecotourism and different kinds of tourism. So for us, we are more interested in a holistic view, a global view, other than this segmentation, because you also realize that those different, the evolution and what was important or emphasized at different times in the last 2 decades or more was dependent on who was speaking. The pro-poor tourism was the language of academia, right? Pro-poor tourism was the language of academia. Community-based tourism was the language of development NGOs, right? Responsible tourism was a combination of tour operators and academia at that particular time. When we now come to regenerative tourism, you realize that it's more from the hospitality segment of the tourism industry. Then we've got sustainable tourism was actually an agenda that was also pushed by governments. It was not a private sector-led agenda. It was academic, but accepted by public sector more than it was received by private sector. Now, when you look at nature positive tourism, you see a lot of NGOs in conservation, NGOs in climate and all those kind of things. So it's also important to know at any given time who was driving what, and you will see very clearly where the interest is, because in nature positive tourism, climate takes a very center stage, and then social issues and communities are beginning to take a backstage. In regenerative tourism, green agenda takes a more prominent face than community and social issues again. Sustainable tourism remains the balanced one that looks at all of them, because it looks like it's the global one that is a global agenda for everyone. I'll stop there for now.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. So this is what you made me think about. So when it comes to sustainable tourism and hospitality, if you look around, I mean, I can go right now on basically any website in the hospitality industry, and everyone is sustainable, right? Everyone has their own on the website, their sustainability area. But as we know, and it's super interesting what you say about luxury and, and ecotourism. So what is not working there? Because while everyone in the tourism and hospitality industry is claiming to be sustainable, because everyone in their website, or they give some money to someone for the environment, or they have solar panels, what is not working there? Because everyone is sustainable, but we are not really seeing a, sustainable development as we would like to see it.
I think what is, from my perspective, what is not working is that businesses don't know how to work with anything that is voluntary. If you give them choices, when you give a profit-making organization choices, right? They'll always take the choice that has less investment and more profit. At the same time, they will want to benefit from something that is a trend and which consumers are interested in, or are decisions that consumers are influencing the decisions that consumers are making. So all businesses in tourism know one thing for sure: they cannot deny it anymore, that sustainability is influencing consumer choices, right? But many of them are not willing to go the full length. So each one of them is looking for a way of how to add a little sustainability to what they're doing. And the assumption is that there is no standard measurements for the consumers to know. And I think the consumers are very confused in all this. The businesses have confused them. So what is not working is that the businesses are not, many of them are not fully committed And they're not committed because, like I was saying, businesses are used to be regulated. Yeah, private sector is used to be regulated. And anything that is not regulated, that is optional, I think they will take their time. If they cannot see it in the bottom line, and that's not to say that you cannot measure sustainability and see it in the bottom line. If you are diligent enough, and you include it in your systems, and you have accountability systems, yeah, for your environmental, your green investments, and your social investments, and your human rights investments, and all those areas that we know about of sustainability, on fair trade and everything else. If you're diligent about them and you plan for them and you have their measurement for indicators, you will be able to tell what you invested, and at the end of the day, you will have your sustainability scorecard, a financial scorecard for sustainability. But businesses are not diligent enough with it, and so therefore they use this excuse and say, I can't tell how it affects my bottom line, but it's a good thing to have anyway. So I'm going to put some solar panels, and I'm going to put a whole page and call it sustainability, because we have put in a little solar, or we have changed something about how we manage our water. So yeah, I think that is where the big problem is for me over the years, that businesses are not ready for doing anything, incorporating anything that is not regulated. Because then if I will not lose anything by not doing this, then why should I even think about it? And I'm competing with other businesses that are not even paying attention to it at all. Those who have found out that it works have gone for it 100% and are deeply committed to it, and it is working for them. The other ones are sitting on the fence, want to benefit from it, but don't want to invest in the whole process and in the systems that make it work. And then there is a way in which that we're dealing, tourism is a leisure industry. And I've had this over and over again, where businesses have said that our clients have, when we try to push the sustainability agenda, our clients are saying that they are on holiday and they don't want to be made to feel guilty about their holidays. So they should not be, they don't want all this detailed information about sustainability, responsibility, and what they cannot do and what they can't do. They just want to be on holiday. And while they're on holiday, they want to have their freedom they want to have a shower for 1 hour. They should not be worried about the water shortage in that destination. If they want to leave the lights on the whole night, they should not be told that, you know what, at this time we try and switch off some lights so that we can save on energy. They don't want those things. So some businesses have just said, this is leisure industry, and our clients have paid for leisure, and we're giving them leisure. And so if it means consuming what they want and how they want it, then they do it. And that's the earlier on myth that I mentioned, that there was the misconception that sustainability and luxury don't go hand in hand. But today, I know, Martha, that you have been to places that are businesses are very responsible and still very luxurious. I have been to those places as well, and I know they do exist, and I know that luxury can have limits and still be luxury. It doesn't have to be excesses. They can still be luxury, and there is knowledge is power. It depends on when this is communicated. I always tell businesses, if I have showed up, you say nothing about sustainability in my package, in my processes, and then I have paid for a luxury holiday, and suddenly I realize I'm arriving and you're beginning to bombard me with all this information and updates and all that. Find a way of incorporating the message along the booking process, that I will know in the process who you are and what you do. And it doesn't have to come all at once. It could come in bits and places and pieces, so that by the time I'm traveling, I know exactly which company I'm traveling with. But if you want to remain anonymous and just take bookings, and then on arrival you want to pretend to be sustainable, then your guests will be angry.
Yeah, thank you. That's very, very interesting. And you raise also another topic, which is one of my favorite quotes from you, which is in the last tourist, that you say that often tourists see destinations as destinations and they don't realize those are other people's houses. So in some way, we need to go there, right? So as you say, like almost like this educating the tourists, and that can happen also in luxury tourism. So how do you see this connection between having tourists see destinations as other people's homes, and that also means being more respectful. It's almost like a shift, in sociology we talk about the paradigm shift, almost way of mindset. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I'm a big proponent. It's been my message for a long time that all tourism businesses, when they're selling packages and holidays and everything, there's a reason why tourists are also called visitors, and there's a reason why they're also called guests. If you're a guest, it means you have a host. If you're a visitor, it means you have a host. There's someone who is taking care of you. There's someone who was taking care of the place so that they're able to receive you in that place, right? And the person taking care of the place is not just the hotel where you're going to stay. It's not a lodge where they're going to stay. The destination is much bigger than that particular little place where you stay, right? So think about it that way, that when you go to a place, you're a guest, you're a visitor, and you're being hosted by that whole community, by that places where you visit. Even in our natural day-to-day relationships, when we visit, we respect our hosts, right? And we always want to know a little bit about our hosts. We take time to learn about our hosts, right? We try to do some things like our hosts will do them. And this is where the whole thing that you're talking about, shifting of mindsets. So if you come to visit me in my house and you find that in my house people take a shower for 10 minutes and they're out, because you will know what is happening in this place. You can't decide that because you're a visitor you are entitled, and so you're gonna do yours for 1 hour and 2 hours. Even in our day-to-day relationship, that one, it's almost disrespectful. But when we visit places, we want to come and impose our own expectations and lifestyles on community, as though they didn't exist, as though these places exist in space and there are no people. I have had situations where visitors, tourists were complaining, or they've written in their comments that we didn't expect to see many people. And I was like, but where were you going? You should have gone to another planet, because in this planet, people live. There are human beings who live. So you see that guests are saying that, oh, there were too many people. Sometimes they even say, there were too many people in my lodge. And we have had those comments sometimes when they go to places and find that there are residents of that country also visiting, like visitors going to Kenya, Mombasa, at this time, the coast of Kenya. You find that there are many Kenyan families in the same hotels visiting, because we've got an increase and rise in middle class, and many people are able to take a holiday. Then I guess says that I did not expect to see so many people in my hotel. Then you people, quote unquote, and you ask, what do you mean? What do you mean you did not expect to see so many people in their hotel? So it's important that travelers should inform themselves, but also travel agencies, tour operators, because they act as intermediaries, should encourage through sharing literature about the places people are visiting, so that they know that they are not going to visit some exotic, excluded places where there are no other people, and they will be the only ones, and they will not meet people on the way, different people than them. Responsible tourism, sustainable tourism is inclusive. You're going to meet all kinds of people as you travel. The same way you get into a flight and you expect to meet different people. You get to a destination, expect to meet different people in those destinations. But more than anything else, appreciate that these places exist when they are not visitors. And I always like to add that the things that tourism calls experiences, when they say, come and experience our cultures, those cultures are sustained by the same people, the owners of the destinations. Yeah, tourism businesses create even when you go into a hotel and a restaurant, and the people who are serving you there, they're the hosts. The experience that you get as you are checked in, the experience that you get in the restaurant, the experience is because there is a host. They're the ones who make the experience. This is the significance of the host at every level. The experience that you get is about them. You spend half your, or three quarters or 80% of your holiday in the hands of one type of host or another. Whether it's the driver that transfers you from the airport, or there's the one that checks you into your room. Yeah, the ones that takes you out shopping to experience the culture. You are always in the hands of a host, and that host lives in that destination. They call it home. They call it home. So we cannot separate destinations from the hosts. The hosts make the destination.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. Sometimes I hear tourists too, and it's almost like they think that out of sight, they don't exist anymore. People that like they see the community and then they disappear. I mean, they have to go somewhere, right? They have to live somewhere. So that's interesting. And I wanted to ask you, talking about sustainable tourism, sustainability, we often talk about Kenya as a case study. How do you see the present and the future right now when it comes to sustainable tourism? I love when you talk about animals. I watch a bunch of videos of you talking about animals too. Can you tell us a little bit more about all of this?
I think sustainable tourism 10 years ago and today in Kenya is very different. The awareness levels, not just awareness, but even the practice has grown. There has been growth, not just in awareness, but also in practice. Kenya is amongst the first few countries in Africa to be bold enough to experiment with a certification program, a homegrown certification program. Before there was the GSTCs of this world, Kenya had experimented, and I was part of that experiment. I led the process to develop this program, national certification program, with the support of a few other thinkers who were bold at that particular time to draft and write a certification program for camps and lodges in Kenya. I think it's been nearly 2 decades. It's going to be in a little while, in a few years. It's going to be 2 decades since we did that. But between that time and now, the awareness has grown. As we speak here today, the government and the Ministry of State Department for Tourism are actually working on sustainability regulations for registering tourism businesses. That now you will be required to have certain minimum sustainability practices that you will have to prove for you to be licensed to run a lodge, a hotel. Then later on, they're going to come down. They're also working with tour operators, and some of our team members are helping in that process. And as I mentioned earlier on, that sustainability has been 100% voluntary in many places. I think in Europe and where you are, there could have been some elements of regulation. But in Eastern Africa and much of Africa, I know in Africa for sure, their sustainability in tourism has not been incorporated in regulation. So we're seeing a stage where we are going into regulation, and these regulations, like in protected areas, they're already being seen in community conserved areas. It's just because of sustainability, we have what we call now bed density. Bed density means you can only develop a certain number of tourism rooms per certain number of acres. So in some of the community conserved areas where the guidelines are for the destinations are developed purely as sustainable destinations, things like bed densities have been set. This is voluntary, it's yet to come into regulation, but there are many community conserved areas, wildlife areas that now use those bed densities, like for every 700 acres, there are only 2 beds that you can put in there. And you can only put 2 beds in there because you are trying to reduce the footprint in terms of the number of people, number of vehicles that can go into that place. You're trying to reduce the damage on land. And that is working very well today. So you can go to certain places in our conserved areas in northern Kenya, like Kipia, in Masai Mara, in places called Taita Taveta, and you'll enjoy amazing wildlife views and see very few vehicles, because the rules are also saying you can only spend so much time at a sighting, so that you cannot harass the animal. So if you go to a sighting and you have stopped there for 10 minutes to watch wildlife, you should move away, because then you allow the wildlife to also move. You don't want them to feel like they have been locked in. So there are a number of good practices in this country for wildlife viewing in the community conserved areas, or what we call conservancies, that are setting the standards, which now we hope that government is going to adopt them in regulations to make sure that wildlife viewing remains a great experience, a premium experience for those who come to Kenya. We know that Masai Mara is the best game viewing area in Eastern and Southern Africa. But we are beginning to see certain elements of degradation in the areas because of the slightly in certain times of the year. I would dare say that Masai Mara experiences over tourism. There are too many, and it's a different kind of over tourism. Yeah, you know, we always talk about over tourism in terms of people outnumbering visitors coming into a destination and almost outnumbering the residents of that area, and so everything else is being developed to serve tourism, right? But you, in a situation like in the wildlife areas, when we have a situation where the number of vehicles and people in those vehicles and the lodges in those areas are outnumbering the wildlife, then we know we're having a different situation in terms of over tourism, where it is now the nature that is being outnumbered by those who are enjoying that nature. So work is already being done to avoid loss of habitat, to avoid stress to wildlife because of our activities. We know that iconic species like cheetahs are losing habitat because and not even losing habitat. Most of the time they have lost habitat, but more than anything else, they are not able to raise their calves because in certain areas tourism is not regulated. So tourism happens, it's throughout the day, it's throughout the year, it's in all places. Cheetahs are day hunters. They're not able to hunt during the day, so they get their babies and they're separated from their children during game drives, and they cannot hunt and they cannot go back. By the time they go back, probably a lion has already, another predator has predated on their cubs, or the cubs have come out and they've gotten lost and they've been predated on. So the populations have been dwindling, and it is a direct impact of tourism, because there's no other factor that can be found for the decline other than the cubs do not all grow to maturity. The mortality rates, early mortality for the cubs is very high for the cheetah cubs. We also have we have leopards that are losing habitat. We have elephants that are losing habitat. So if we don't do something about tourism to make it more responsible in our natural areas, to secure these places and make sure that the communities that live there also benefit from it. And this is the biggest debate we're having today in terms of sustainability when we talk about conservation areas and wildlife tourism. We are having interesting discussions around what informs the value of a destination. Is it what the tourist pays, or is it what the quality of life of the local people? My answer is the latter. The value of a destination must be seen in the lives of the people. The value of a destination, yes, I agree, the leopard is beautiful, the cheetah is beautiful, the elephants are amazing, I love them all. But we cannot peg the value of a wildlife destination on the beauty of nature and forget the well-being of the people who live there. So the value of destination must also be measured by the well-being of the people who live there. Now, as generations are changing, we now have Generation Z, their interests are different, they think differently, they're arguing, will they value wildlife vis-a-vis their well-being? They might say, I love wildlife, it's great, but I want better for me as well. And if that is not taken care of today, the options will be very small, and they could just say, I'm sorry, I love you, elephants, but I want my life as well, because it's not paying off for me. So it's a delicate balance when we start talking matters of sustainability in nature and the value for nature, and who determines that value and who benefits from that value at the end of the day. There's very intricate discussions around conservation and sustainability, because sometimes traditional conservation has been so romanticized around the animal that the people, the same thing we were talking about, those places where we find protected areas and parks, immediately around them are people's homes. And these people also are hosts to wildlife, not just tourists.
That is so interesting. It's very interesting. And also because I think that, and this is my last question for you, we always talk about, me and you talk about tourism systems, right? You know, it's my favorite word. Tourism system is like, you know, I keep repeating it. So what is the problem here? What I'm finding, also conducting my research, is that actually one of the main issues of sustainable development, sustainable planning, is there is a lack of a system, meaning that sometimes I have the impression, conducting my own research, that the institution speak a completely different language from the population, from the hosts, right, from the community. And also you have like the hospitality industry who speaks another language. So they are all in the same place, but they don't collaborate. And at the beginning, when I was younger, I thought it was just, oh, they don't like each other. But right now, conducting research myself is almost like a communication issue, like really a communication, like different languages. So what can we do there?
I think you got it right. I think there are traditions. Tourism has traditions, and each of those segments that you mentioned have very deep-rooted traditions, and those traditions have put limitations on their communication, and in not just communication, even interactions amongst themselves. And the ones that are most cut out and excluded are mainly the host communities. Most of the time, they are cut out and they are excluded from conversations. For example, when decisions are made about how to charge for different experiences, there's no one who consults the communities about how these experiences will be valued and how they are charged. The tourism industry, the players inside there decide what is valuable and what is not. And so in places like Africa that is rich in culture, and somebody has decided that culture is cheap. So a guest will be told, they have booked accommodation for, I'm using this as an example. My bed and breakfast is $400, $450, $500, and it could go even to $1,000 depending on where I'm staying. But when I go to experience a community, have a community experience or a cultural experience, you tell that guest that experience is worth $20. And when the community asks for $50, you say that that is too much for the community. Why is it too much for the community? And your accommodation is $500. Why is it too much? So you see the language of the tourism industry does not speak. It doesn't speak for everyone. The businesses speak for themselves. And they have captured the market so much because of the booking systems, the access and usage and consumption systems in tourism have allowed somebody to think for us and make every decision for us, and almost box us in that as travelers, we have very limited choices on how we end up interacting with places and discussions. And this is because of the systems, like you mentioned. We've always said it matters that the tourism system is broken and it needs fixing. Even as we sit here, it needs fixing. It's not working for everyone. It's not equitable, right? It's exclusive in many ways. And even to a certain extent, from the example that I've given, it's discriminatory. And it goes all the way to the policies. There's a complete disconnect. And the emphasis sometimes is on just revenue and numbers. Revenue and numbers. And we know that when we go behind those numbers, what we discover behind those numbers is not as rosy as the headlines that we see about the millions of arrivals in Africa or millions of arrivals, I don't know where. No, if you dig behind those numbers, you find that there's lots of inequalities, there's lots of exclusion, there's elements of exploitation, there's elements of elite capture of the industry or capitalism at the highest level in this industry. So yes, the systems are disconnected. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. This was great, so insightful as always. So I'm going to stop the recording, but thank you so much. And I'm sure my students found it so interesting. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Martha.